We received a call from the FBI that they had some information that they wanted to share with us. Basically, the one agent coming in pretty quickly because they wanted to speak to us before it got out, what they believed to be Gabby, before we heard it from anybody else.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. We just spoke about Gabby Laundrie breaking her silence, compelling her parents and telling her parents to do the right thing and asking Brian to turn himself in if he's still alive. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about the Petitos and Schmidts because they were just on Dr. Phil and revealed some information that I think is kind of things that we hadn't heard yet. So speaking for the first time publicly outside of their press conference since Brian went missing, they addressed a lot of questions about the days leading up to the missing persons report, their thoughts about what's going on with Brian, and some discussions about what they think is going on behind the scenes, as well as whether they they think Brian is alive and where they think he might be hiding. So there's been a lot of questions about specifically how was it that they actually identified Gabby. So Jim Schmidt, her stepfather, went to Wyoming, and he said that he went there because the family felt that they needed to have presence on the ground in Wyoming because that was the last place that she had been seen. When they were searching there, they did find a female, and he said to Dr. Phil that it was an item of clothing in which he knew was Gabby's. It was her favorite sweatshirt, and it was that in which he was able to use to identify it was her.
They described a piece of clothing to me that matched one of her favorite sweatshirts that we knew was hers.
So it was her stepfather who actually made the positive identification for the authorities, and then they went on to do the full operation, which confirmed it was Gabby, but Jim Schmidt said that it was him who identified Gabby, and then it was also him who notified his wife as well as Gabby's father and stepmother. So Jim is the one who identified Gabby. And I can't imagine how hard that must have been for Jim to be in Wyoming by himself, having to make these identifications and then have to call his wife and call his stepdaughter's father and the stepmother and sort of share that information. It must have been so hard for him. So after, before they even got to that point, she was only missing, and they had hoped that she would come home alive. And they actually apparently reached out multiple times to Roberta Laundrie. While she was missing, and Nicole Schmidt said that she actually believed that Brian and Gabby were missing at the exact same time because she hadn't heard from either one of them. She didn't just think it was her daughter that was missing. She assumed it was both of them. As a concerned mom, she says that she reached out to Roberta and said to her, "I think our kids are missing," left her messages and sent her text messages. Roberta Laundrie, during those days before the missing persons report was filed, never once responded, according to Nicole.
A couple numbers from
Police officers called her, detectives called her.
But you all called?
Yes.
Oh, we called.
You called, you called?
I can't tell you how many times.
She called.
You called and you
He
called?
called.
And what did you get?
No response.
Voicemails.
Nothing. Voicemails.
Joseph Petito said that it got to the point that at the very end, he was sending them messages saying, "I'm going to call the police if you don't tell me if you've seen Gabby or if you know what's going on with Gabby." And they still never responded.
Voicemails. Yeah.
And then I would send texts on top of that.
No response.
One of the texts, we're going to call the police, right? Just letting you know because we have no idea. No response.
Nicole said that she didn't know for sure that Brian wasn't even home until she found out on September 11th that the van was back in Florida. Up until that point, she had no clue that Brian had gotten back to Florida because, as Nicole said in the interview with Dr. Phil, is that van had to get home somehow. Brian had to have gotten that home somehow. Now, another interesting bit of information that came out of this is their attorney actually confirmed to Dr. Phil that Brian Laundrie stole Gabby's credit card, used her credit card to get home, and that's how he got home to Florida.
And he ran, he stole her credit card, he used her credit card to get home, and then ran from the police.
He is currently charged with bank fraud, using somebody's bank card and taking out money in excess of $1,000. And this is the first time we are hearing from someone specifically connected to Gabby saying Brian stole her credit cards and used her money to get home. The attorney said that this wasn't indicative of someone that was innocent. The fact that Brian was hiding or not, he ran as soon as everything was going on, and the fact that the parents are not helping authorities and not responding to the Petitos or the Schmitz. He said it's not a good strategy because if and when this goes into criminal court, the jury and the judge will be able to look at their actions leading up to this to sort of give them an understanding of why they would act this way, and fleeing, running, and obstructing justice is not favorable to juries and attorneys. He also said that he's never seen an attorney advise clients to literally not help if they can't help. He said he doesn't understand the strategy that Stephen Bertinello is giving to his clients, and he doesn't understand why the Laundries are not providing information on where Gabby was or even where on Brian is. So that's one thing I thought was interesting was, okay, it was Gabby's credit card. They have confirmed this. Next, they asked whether or not they actually believe if Brian's alive. And they all said, without a doubt, they all believe that Brian is still alive.
You believe he's hiding somewhere? You believe he's hiding somewhere? Do you believe he's hiding somewhere?
I do,
Why do you believe that?
because he's a coward.
Alive. They all believe that he's likely on the run. They said that he could potentially be camping out off the grid, because that is something that Brian had willingly and knowingly bragged about, his experience of camping and being out in the survival skills. And Gabby's father said that he thinks he's too much of a coward to actually end his life, that he would much rather flee, that he wouldn't end his life, he wouldn't take responsibility, and he would go on the run. A coward all the way. He even went as far as calling the Laundries cowards for not actually helping them find Gabby.
Anyone that lived in that house is a coward, and they don't know how to stand up for their actions. They are.
Where do you think?
Another thing that Joseph Petito said in this interview was that the Laundries are not acting like parents who have a missing child. He pointed out that when Gabby was missing, he and his wife and the step parents were all active using social media, going to the police, putting out any sort of flyers and compelling anyone, journalists, to speak to them about the missing persons case. He said outside of simply contacting the police to let them know that Brian is missing, they have not once done an interview compelling Brian to come home or asking the public for help. They have never once stepped foot outside of the home to look for Brian, and they have not once shown any indication that they don't believe that Brian is, they're not acting like they're worried that Brian is gone, is basically what Joe Petito felt. Dr. Phil kind of echoed those statements and said that, this strategy seems like the parents either don't want authorities to find him, or they don't know where, or they know where he is. He couldn't understand under any other circumstances why they wouldn't be making more of a public plea for Brian to come home. It's pretty interesting when you think about it in this context. Gabby's parents really did have a missing child, and they were utilizing social media to the fullest extent to find their child. Roberta and Christopher Laundrie weren't even returning phone calls of the Petitos or the Schmitz when they were desperately reaching out to find any sort of answers, not even cognizant nor aware that Brian might have any involvement in any of this. If you think of it in that context, knowing that these parents were out camping with their son and going on different camping trips, knowing that they had parents literally leaving them messages begging for any help, any indication, anything, and they never responded. It makes me wonder, at what point did they actually hire an attorney? When was Stephen Bertolino brought into this case, and at what point did he tell them to stop talking? Can you put yourself in the position of the Laundries? Say they don't even know anything. Just give them the benefit of the doubt that they walked into this like they knew nothing. Say Brian never told them anything. Can you imagine getting a phone call from your child's significant other's parents? The parents are desperate. They want to know if you know anything. They're worried about the safety of their child, and their last time their child was spoken with, they were with your child. Would you ignore the pleas of that parent? Would you completely negate those cries for help? I can't imagine under what circumstance, outside of the fact is that they had information that they didn't want to give them, and they didn't want to make statements that might incriminate them. But I can't understand why still, with it being over 2 weeks since Brian has been missing, that they are still not providing any help to anyone to find Brian, other than having their attorney continually put out all of these lame statements, in my opinion, that seem to suggest that they are pleading the fifth in so many ways. I understand that innocent people will typically and can be represented by an attorney, but in this case, your son is missing, you're doing nothing to help authorities find him, you're outside gardening, and you have a family that is desperate for answers, and you're doing nothing to help them. Instead, you're worried about your constitutional rights. It starts to feel like maybe they had some involvement potentially in helping Brian after the fact. Or maybe they don't want to incriminate Brian, but why are they protecting Brian so much at the expense of everybody else? Are they in denial, or do they truly feel like Brian is an innocent man, or do they have something of their own to hide? Even their own daughter can't be certain now that they aren't involved in this somehow. You can check out Dr. Phil's full episode with the Petitos in the description box below, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Bye, guys.